Hello one and all, I am Will Scarlet, the uncatchable fox of Sherwood Forest, at your service. If I may assist thee in any way whatsoever, simply shout and I always come running. Now, some questions have arisen in regards to what people in my time did to defend themselves. There were certainly many different ways to do so. The easiest, of course, was armor. I, for example, am wearing bracers upon my wrists to guard my forearms from any attacks. They were most often made of leather, though occasionally, particularly if thou could afford it, it would have a large steel plate upon it. It was also known as chainmail, tiny little rings of mail that could be woven into a shirt that would be worn underneath a padded gamison, such as this, and it could protect you from being cut with either a sword or something of that nature. It didn't protect very well from arrow fire, unfortunately. Arrows did to pierce chainmail very well, in fact. That is why eventually, as time passed on, past the 13th and 14th centuries, you started to see knights who were wearing large plates of mail, as we sort of know them today. My red leather gamison right here is a fairly common battlefield appropriation. You would often find this on top of, as I said, chainmail, but the chainmail was very expensive. It was costly and very time-consuming to make. So in many cases, many simple folks would have to make do with a gamison if they were fortunate enough to afford that. Most of the time, the peasantry, when they did to go to fight as simple enlisted men, basically, they had to deal with the fact that they were armed and protected with whatever they wore when they worked in the fields. Oftentimes, most weapons on the medieval battlefield were not as the common sword, as we believe, but often guarding implements. Spears, lances, billhooks, falchions, axes especially, and warhammers. They were far more common because they were tools that were used every day outside of battle. Now, when we come to the sword was often more for prestige than actual use. It was often a secondary weapon, particularly in England. In England, they didn't have proper steel-making techniques, and English steel tended to be a lot weaker than the rest of the world. So a knight on horseback, his sword was not his primary weapon, but his lance was. He would charge into battle with his lance, charge into the front ranks. Eventually the lance would break. He would then, in that situation, he would then pull out a sword. His sword could be a single-hander, as you see here, or it could be a hand and a half, which often has a little bit more length, is probably somewhere about 6 inches longer than this, so that at times it could be used single-handedly, or at times it could be held upon tightly and for a much more powerful stroke. The sword itself, in medieval times, is actually quite simple. As you can see here, I have a very simple handle, a weighted pommel to give it balance, to make it faster, a simple cross hilt guard to protect the hand and wrist in the event of any parries, and as you can see, a nice tapered blade. It makes it lighter as it goes on, but without giving away too much strength. Swords were to often have what we see here are fullers, these deep grooves. Now, in many cases, they are incorrectly referred to as blood grooves. That came about. People thought if you stab someone, the flesh would close around the wound, and it would not be able to bleed. And so people started to believe that with these fullers in here, that it would allow blood to pass out. But that is, in fact, incorrect. The fullers are simply to take away weight from the blade without retaining any of its, without having it lose any of its overall strength. You can see these ridges are the full thickness, and it's a way to lighten the blade much more so that it could be moved very easily, but that it would not break when parrying an attack if someone were to cut at you and you have to beat their blade out of the way. Now, the reality is, too, that the easiest way to avoid attack was simply to not have to parry, but to simply move out of the way. Swords, because of their station as being a symbol of power, many cases soldiers who had swords were afraid to use them for fear of them breaking. It was costly to repair them. So they would have much rather have preferred to simply step out of the way than to actually try and, as we see today, theatrically parry them away.